Good evening. I am Carl Gustav Jung, speaking to you across the boundaries of time, because what I have to say cannot wait any longer. The psychological crisis I foresaw in my time has reached its zenith in yours. You live in an age of unprecedented connection, yet suffer from an epidemic of isolation. You have access to more knowledge than any generation before you, yet wisdom eludes you. You maintain hundreds of relationships through glowing screens, yet the soul hungers for depth that remains unfulfilled. I must warn you of a peril that lurks not in the shadows of distant threats, but within the very fabric of your daily interactions, within your friendships, your romantic partnerships, your family dynamics, and yes, even those digital connections you call social networks. What you fail to see is that your relationships have become the projection screens for your unexamined psyche. The people you surround yourself with are not merely companions on your journey. They are reflections of your unconscious mind, carriers of your disowned qualities, and often unwitting participants in the drama of your unresolved complexes. That I term this the hidden threat in your circle, because the greatest danger to your psychological well-being lies not with strangers, but with those closest to you, and more precisely, in what these relationships reveal about your own unintegrated self. In my work, I discovered that the human psyche seeks wholeness through a process I called individuation. But this process has been profoundly disrupted in your era. Your social structures, your technologies, your very modes of communication now conspire to keep you fragmentary, divided, and unconscious of the psychological forces that truly drive you. Tonight, I speak to you with urgency because I see a world where the collective shadow grows denser with each passing day, where projection has become the primary mode of interaction, and where the failure to confront one's inner darkness threatens not just individual well-being, but the very fabric of your society. What I am about to share is not merely academic psychology. It is a map for navigating the treacherous waters of your own unconscious as it manifests in your relationships. Hear me now, for the time of psychological naivety must end if you are to survive the crisis that engulfs you. The most dangerous aspect of the human psyche is not what you know about yourself, but what you refuse to know. I called this the shadow, that repository of all you deny, reject, and disown within yourself. It contains your unacceptable impulses, your shameful desires, your primitive emotions, and the aspects of your nature that conflict with your conscious self-image. But understand this fundamental truth. What is unconscious does not disappear. What you refuse to examine within yourself will be projected outward, particularly onto those closest to you. This is the first and most critical danger in your social circle. You do not see others as they truly are, but as carriers of your own disowned psychological material. Consider how quickly you find yourself irritated by a friend's arrogance, while remaining blind to your own. Notice how you can detect selfishness in a partner while justifying your similar behaviors as self-care. Observe how you criticize in others precisely what you cannot bear to recognize in yourself. This is projection, a psychological defense as automatic as breathing and twice as unconscious. Your social circle is not random. The unconscious mind is teleological. It moves toward wholeness even when the conscious mind resists. You are drawn to people who carry your shadow, who embody what you have disowned, who trigger what remains unhealed within you. Your irritations, your inexplicable attractions, your immediate judgments. These are the signposts pointing to your shadow in your modern world. This process has become pathological. Your social media platforms have become projection machines of unprecedented power. You follow those who represent your idealized self while reacting with venom toward those who embody your disowned qualities. The other side, politically, culturally, spiritually, becomes the receptacle for all you cannot accept in yourself. Let me illustrate. The colleague whose success fills you with resentment carries your disowned ambition. The friend whose neediness exhausts you reflects your unacknowledged vulnerability. The family member whose anger terrifies you connects with your repressed rage. The political figure you despise with unmatched intensity embodies qualities you cannot face within yourself. Most dangerously, your intimate relationships become battlegrounds where this unconscious material is exchanged. Partners become locked in what I would call projection-trajection cycles, each carrying the disowned parts of the other, each suffering from wounds neither fully understands. Children become repositories for their parents' unfulfilled dreams and unresolved complexes. Friendships collapse under the weight of unrecognized projections. This is not merely uncomfortable, it is psychologically devastating. When your relationships are dominated by projection, authentic connection becomes impossible. You relate not to others, but to your own unconscious material. You remain isolated even in the midst of connection because you cannot see beyond the veil of your projections. And there's a terrible irony here. The more you deny your shadow, the more power it gains over your relationships. The qualities you most despise in others will be precisely those you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. What you flee from within, you will find without. There is no escape from the shadow except through conscious integration. The first step towards psychological safety is recognizing that your social circle is a mirror reflecting your unintegrated psyche. Your friends, partners, enemies, and even strangers are not merely who they are. They are carriers of your projected material. Until you recognize this, you remain unconscious, unfree, and in psychological danger. Now I must help you identify the warning signs of relationships dominated by unconscious forces. These patterns are the visible manifestations of the psyche's unfinished business, and they persist until made conscious. First, observe the phenomenon of instant and inexplicable reactions. When you meet someone and feel immediate attraction or repulsion without clear cause, the unconscious is at work. These reactions, what you might call chemistry or bad vibes, are rarely about the other person. They are your unconscious recognizing something familiar, something that resonates with your inner landscape. Second, notice repetitive relationship patterns. If you continually attract partners who abandon you, friends who betray you, or colleagues who undermine you, you are not merely unfortunate. You are unconsciously recreating scenarios that connect to your unresolved complexes. I call these complexes emotional energy organized around archetypal cores, often formed in childhood. The father complex leads you to seek authority figures who inevitably disappoint you. The mother complex draws you toward nurturing relationships that become suffocating. The wounded child complex attracts rescuers who reinforce your sense of helplessness. These patterns continue until you recognize your participation in their creation. Third, pay attention to emotional intensity disproportionate to actual events. When a minor slight from a friend produces overwhelming rage, when a simple disagreement triggers profound anxiety, when ordinary separation causes devastating abandonment feelings. These are not reactions to present reality, but to psychological material from your past being activated in the present. Fourth, observe how groups amplify these dynamics. Why called the collective unconscious manifests powerfully in your social groups. Friend circles, workplaces, online communities. These become containers for collective shadow material. The group projects its disowned qualities onto outsiders, creating enemies who embody what the group cannot acknowledge in itself, in your modern context. This manifests as increasingly polarized social and political discourse. Each group sees the other not as they are, but as carriers of their disowned shadow qualities. Progressives and conservatives, religious and secular, traditional and modern. Each projects their shadow onto the other, creating a cycle of mutual dehumanization that makes dialogue impossible. Within smaller social circles, this manifests as scapegoating, gossip, and exclusion. The identified problem person in a friend group is often carrying the projected shadow material of the entire group. They become the container for qualities others cannot acknowledge in themselves. Consider how in workplaces, certain individuals become repositories for collective discomfort. The colleague labeled difficult often expresses what others secretly feel but dare not say. The employee deemed too emotional may be expressing the unacknowledged vulnerability of an organization that values stoicism in romantic relationships. Projection creates particular damage. Partners become carriers of each other's parental amigos, childhood wounds, and disowned qualities. The unconscious selection of partners is rarely accidental. You choose those who activate your complexes, who can play the roles your unconscious has scripted. Most troublingly, your digital environments have amplified these patterns beyond anything I could have imagined. Social media platforms are projection machines designed to trigger unconscious reactions, amplify emotional intensity, and sort you into groups defined by mutual projection. Your personalized content reinforces your persona while helping you avoid your shadow. The danger here cannot be overstated. When relationships are dominated by projection and unconscious complexes, psychological development stalls. You remain trapped in repetitive patterns, recreating the same scenarios with different faces, suffering the same wounds with new people, and never achieving the integration that your psyche seeks. What you face now is nothing less than an individuation emergency. Individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole through the integration of unconscious content, has never been more difficult nor more essential than in your time. The modern world presents unprecedented obstacles to this process. Your technologies fragment attention, making the deep inner work of individuation nearly impossible. Your social structures reward the development of a rigid persona while punishing authentic expression. Your economic systems value productivity over wholeness, utility over meaning. The consequences of failed individuation are evident everywhere you look. Depression and anxiety have reached epidemic proportions. Addiction serves as a substitute for authentic connection with the self. Polarization reveals the projection of collective shadow material. Violence erupts when the unconscious can no longer be contained by social constraints. What you call mental health crises are, in many cases, thwarted individuation processes. The psyche will move toward wholeness one way or another. When conscious integration is blocked, the unconscious finds destructive expressions. Your rising rates of isolation, extremism, and despair are not merely social problems. They're symptoms of a collective failure to engage with the unconscious in a constructive manner. Particularly concerning is how social media and digital technology have created what I would call pseudo-individuation. People construct digital personas that present an idealized self while providing no pathway to genuine integration. The shadow grows stronger in the dark, finding expression in anonymous online behavior, polarized viewpoints, and the dehumanization of others. Your relationships suffer most acutely from this failure. Without individuation, you remain unconscious of your projections, trapped in transference, and unable to see others as they truly are. Authentic love becomes impossible when the other person serves merely as a screen for your projected material. Consider how many relationships in your world are based not on genuine connection, but on mutual projection and unconscious contracts. Partners agree to carry disowned aspects of each other. Friends form groups based on shared illusions. Families maintain silence around their collective shadows. Communities unite around a common enemy who carries their collective projections. The political divisions that threaten to tear apart your societies are fundamentally psychological in nature. When large portions of the population project their shadows onto others, demonizing them rather than integrating disowned qualities, the social fabric cannot hold. What you see as political problems are, at their core, problems of mass projection and failed individuation. The environmental crisis itself connects to this psychological emergency. Your collective shadow, containing disowned aggression, greed, and destructiveness, has been projected onto the natural world, allowing unconscious exploitation without conscious responsibility. The outer devastation reflects an inner fragmentation. The way forward is clear but demanding. Individuation must become your highest priority, not as a luxury for the privileged few, but as a psychological necessity for all. This means confronting your shadow, withdrawing your projections, integrating your complexes, and developing a conscious relationship with the unconscious. Without this work, your relationships remain battlegrounds for unconscious forces. Your social circles continue to reflect and reinforce your unintegrated psyche. Your technologies amplify rather than heal your psychological fragmentation. Your collective future grows increasingly imperiled by the weight of unintegrated shadow material. The emergency is this: time is running short. The collective shadow grows denser with each generation that refuses the work of individuation. The psychological burden placed on your children increases as unconscious material accumulates. The social consequences of mass projection become more destructive as technology amplifies its impact. Individuation is no longer optional. It is the central psychological task of your time. Without it, authentic relationship becomes impossible. Without it, social cohesion continues to deteriorate. Without it, the hidden threat in your circle grows until it consumes not just your relationships, but your very sense of self. Now I must provide you with practical guidance for breaking free from these unconscious patterns. The work I prescribe is challenging but essential. It is the path towards psychological freedom and authentic relationship. Begin with shadow recognition. Set aside time each day for honest self-reflection, asking, what qualities do I most despise in others? These are signposts pointing to your own disowned qualities. The political opponent whose ignorance infuriates you, the colleague whose selfishness you detest, the friend whose neediness exhausts you, all reflect aspects of yourself awaiting integration. Practice what I called active imagination, a structured dialogue with unconscious figures. When a person triggers strong emotion, imagine conversing with the quality they embody. If someone's arrogance infuriates you, dialogue with your own disowned arrogance. Ask what it wants, what it needs, how it serves you. Record these dialogues in a journal dedicated to shadow work. Examine your dreams with particular attention to recurring figures. The people who appear in your dreams often represent aspects of yourself, not just external individuals. That intimidating figure who pursues you may be your own disowned power. The helpless child you must rescue may be your vulnerable self seeking integration. Create a relationship inventory. List your significant relationships and identify patterns. Do you repeatedly choose partners who cannot commit? Friends who betray your trust? Colleagues who undermine your work? These patterns reveal your unresolved complexes seeking resolution through repetition. Practice projection retrieval. When you find yourself reacting strongly to someone, pause and ask, is this about them or about me? Turn each judgment of another into self-inquiry. She's so controlling becomes, how am I controlling or desiring control in my life? This simple practice begins the process of reclaiming projected material. With close relationships, establish conscious contracts. Speak openly about triggers and projections. Create agreements about how to communicate when unconscious material becomes activated. A simple phrase like, I think I'm projecting right now, can create space for awareness in heated moments. For social media and digital relationships, implement what I would call projection hygiene. Before reacting to content that triggers strong emotion, pause to identify what internal material is being activated. Notice when your online behavior reflects shadow expression, anonymous criticism, obsessive scrolling through triggering content, or dehumanization of those with opposing views. Practice conscious group participation. In your social circles, be the one who gently questions group consensus about problem people. Wonder aloud what disowned qualities the group might be projecting. This doesn't require psychological jargon. Simple questions like, I wonder what this strong reaction tells us about ourselves, can shift group awareness. Develop regular practices for accessing the unconscious. Daily journaling, meditation, artistic expression, movement practices all provide pathways for unconscious material to emerge into consciousness. Without these practices, projection remains the primary outlet for unconscious content. When choosing new relationships, notice immediate attractions and aversions with special attention. Ask what these strong reactions might reveal about your unconscious needs and fears. Consider whether you're seeking someone to carry your projected material rather than a relationship based on authentic seeing. For existing relationships dominated by projection, the work is particularly challenging. It requires gradually withdrawing projections while maintaining connection. Begin by silently recognizing when you're seeing your own material in the other person. Then practice taking responsibility for your reactions without blaming or demanding change from others. With family relationships, where projections often run deepest, work with the awareness that you're not just relating to individuals, but to internal representations built over decades. Differentiate between the actual parent, sibling, or child and the internal imago you've constructed. Notice when your reactions stem from this internal figure rather than the person before you. Integrate shadow qualities gradually through conscious expression. If you've disowned anger, find constructive ways to express it rather than projecting it onto angry people. If you've rejected vulnerability, practice small acts of openness rather than criticizing needy others. This integration reduces the need for projection. Remember that individuation is not perfection but wholeness. The goal is not to eliminate shadow qualities, but to bring them into conscious relationship with the ego. When shadow qualities are acknowledged and given appropriate expression, they no longer need to be projected onto others. The most powerful practice remains consistent self-honesty. Each time you feel certain that another person is the problem, pause and consider what disowned part of yourself they might represent. This simple act of questioning begins to dissolve projection's power over your relationships. My friends, in this troubled future, I have delivered this warning not to discourage you, but to awaken you. The hidden threat in your circle is real, but it is not inevitable. Projection, unconscious relationship patterns, and collective shadow dynamics can be transformed through conscious awareness. What I've described is not merely psychological theory. It is the path toward authentic relationship and genuine connection. When you withdraw your projections, you begin to see others as they truly are, not as carriers of your disowned material. This seeing is the foundation of love itself. Imagine relationships free from the distortions of unconscious projection. Imagine social circles where differences are explored rather than demonized. Imagine a society where the integration of shadow material becomes a shared value rather than a specialized practice. This is not utopian thinking. It is psychological necessity. The work I prescribed is demanding, but consider the cost of avoiding it. Relationships dominated by projection lead to perpetual conflict and isolation. Social groups driven by collective shadow dynamics deteriorate into tribal hatred. Societies that cannot integrate their shadows eventually act them out through violence, oppression, and self-destruction. The emergency I speak of is real, but so is the opportunity. You stand at a psychological crossroads. The technologies that have amplified projection can also facilitate awareness. The social challenges that reveal collective shadow material can motivate integration. The relationship difficulties that expose your unresolved complexes can initiate healing. I urge you to make this work your priority. Not tomorrow, not when circumstances are more favorable, but today. Begin with small acts of psychological honesty. Notice one projection. Question one judgment. Explore one disowned quality. These small steps initiate the great journey of individuation. Remember that this journey is both intensely personal and inherently collective. As you integrate your own shadow, you reduce the burden of projection placed on others. As you withdraw your projections, you create space for others to be seen authentically. Your individual psychological work has social consequences beyond what you can imagine. I leave you with the most important truth I discovered in my lifetime's work. The unconscious seeks consciousness. The psyche moves naturally toward wholeness if given the opportunity. Your task is not to force integration, but to remove the obstacles to the natural process of psychological development. Your vision will become clear. I once wrote, only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. The time for awakening is now. The hidden threat in your circle can become the gateway to your liberation. The projections that distort your relationships can be withdrawn. The unconscious patterns that trap you can be transformed. That I have reached across time to deliver this message because I believe in your capacity for psychological transformation. The future of your relationships, and indeed of your society, depends on your willingness to undertake this journey. Begin today. Your psyche is waiting.